Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Ian Turley, and I am the Senior Resourcing Lead. So we really appreciate you joining us this Wednesday evening. I hope you're managing to keep cool wherever you are. It's certainly very warm at the moment. I'm not going to speak for very long. We've got some really much more interesting people than me for you to hear from. So I'm going to hand over very shortly to Sophie Kershaw, who will introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her fairly short time at Cafcass, but I'm sure she's got some great things to tell you. Just in terms of some housekeeping, it'd be great if you could use the Q&A facility to drop any questions into there that you'd like to ask our panel, and I'm sure we'll do our very best to answer that. Whether it's we may leave the question unanswered because we know we're likely to cover it during the course of the webinar, or if we need to answer it on the chat, then we will. So we make sure you can all see it. Of course, it goes without saying you will get a copy of this recording, and if you are watching this on playback, then thanks for taking the time to watch it then. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sophie, who will introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. So again, a big welcome from us to this live event. As Ian said, really appreciate you taking the time at the end of a very hot day to join us. We're going to be talking about Pathfinder today, which is a new pilot project we've been running in Cafcass alongside the MOJ and partners. So we're also going to share some information about opportunities that are coming up in some of these sites, and you're going to hear from some of our fantastic colleagues who are working in Pathfinder sites at the moment about their experiences. And I hope that you'll also get to hear something about what makes Cafcass unique. So first off, I'm just going to introduce myself. So I'm Sophie Kershaw. I'm a new Assistant Director for Strategic Programme Development and Change, and I'm really working very much on our sort of reform programme in private law and these Pathfinder pilots. So I'm going to be emceeing, so I'll be handing over to various colleagues to tell you more about their work in a bit. But a little bit about me. So I'm pretty new to Cafcass. I'm just a number of weeks in, and I'm really excited to be here. My background's in local authority, where some of you here might be in local authorities at the moment. And I must say that my experience sort of joining Cafcass and the onboarding process through the induction to really meeting people in this sort of process has been fantastic. It's really... There's something about how Cafcass's values is really woven through the organisation, which really stands out to me. There's a real focus on children, and all the staff that I've met are just really dedicated and committed to the children. So it's been really inspiring joining. We know that social work is not an easy job, and we know that it requires support. So I have been impressed by that sort of focus on children, but also that wraparound support that I can see that our social workers receive from their managers here. So I'm going to ask the others to say a little bit more about what life is like in a moment. But first, I'm going to say a little bit about Pathfinder. So Pathfinder started, the first private law Pathfinder pilot started in February 22, launched in Dorset and Bournemouth. And this really followed the findings of a Ministry of Justice report. Some of you will have heard it referred to as the harm report. And it really raised some real worries and concerns about the experiences for children and families going through private law, and recommended that some changes need to be made. So the private law Pathfinder was initiated, and we now have Pathfinder pilots running in Birmingham and Solihull, and most recently launched across West Yorkshire. And it really has got some really ambitious aims. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to improve the court experience for children and families, but particularly for those victims of domestic abuse and their children. We want to really improve children's engagement and their participation in the court process, putting children at the sort of centre of proceedings and ensuring their participation, which really aligns with Cafcass's sort of values as well. We want to reduce delay for children while ensuring that all orders are safe for them. We know that many children in the private law system are waiting much too long for those sort of safe decisions to be made. We want to really focus on aiming to reduce the re-traumatization of domestic abuse victims, including children. So this is really important. We know that many of the families coming through private law have been affected by domestic abuse. And we really need to make sure they don't have to keep retelling their story. So there's a real focus on making sure this system that they're in thinks about their trauma. We want to also improve those working relationships between the court and all agencies, such as children's social care, the police, and the way the whole system works with domestic abuse and other risks of harms. So that sort of collaboration and problem-solving approach really underpins this model. So we're all really excited here in Cafcass that we're beginning to expand the pilot across to different sites. And so there are opportunities now to join us in some of these sites. And I know Ian and Monica, who are here, will sort of drop in some the opportunities around into the chat. So if we move on to the next slide, just thought it would be nice to touch on some of the feedback that we're getting from families about Pathfinder. So I'll give you a second to read those. I think it's really that the middle one really sort of strikes a chord with me, that idea that people are really scared when they're coming into proceedings. And actually the feedback was that the FCA really found the best solution to keep her children safe. So she really had listened. So that was just a bit of a sense of how families are finding that. So this does change the way some of our FCAs are doing their work than our normal child arrangement CAP process. So I'm going to invite first off Kirsty to join, and she is going to tell us about her experience. And so I really appreciate you coming, Kirsty, and I'll be quiet now and hand over to you.
Thanks, Sophie. Afternoon, everyone. So I'm Kirsty MacDonald. I'm a consultant family court advisor, and I've worked for Cafcass now for 5 years. So I started as a family court advisor and then progressed to a consultant family court advisor. Prior to that, I worked in the local authority before coming to Cafcass. Just in terms of the area that I work in the A5 area, so that covers Leeds, Bradford, Wakefield, Kirklees and Calderdale, and we are now in the Pathfinder pilot, well, in our first week of it. So since coming to Cafcass, I've worked primarily in private law, which was known as our Work to First Hearing team, but is now known as the Information and Screening team under Pathfinder. So in terms of coming from the local authority to Cafcass, obviously it's a period of adjustment when you move to any new job, and especially to move into an area such as private law. There was a lot of learning to do in terms of the Cafcass role and our responsibilities in terms of the family court and specifically in terms of private law. I started in the role during sort of one of the COVID lockdown periods, but I was really surprised about how supported I still was, even though I was at home and couldn't get into the office to actually meet anybody. We found creative ways to sort of link up with my colleagues. There was a lot of shadowing opportunities when I first started. I was given a mentor, and there was a clear induction plan, so I felt really supported when I came into the role. I wasn't thrown into the deep end straight away. some of the things that I found in terms of that are unique in terms of working for Cafcass, there's a real focus on learning and development, and we are given as professionals a lot of support, and we're given a lot of space and time to be able to do that, alongside obviously the commitment that we have in terms of working with our families and those pressures as well. So for example, every year there's a practice week that's put on in Cafcass, where it's a week of online sort of workshops, learning events. Some of those are run by Cafcass, some of them are from outside agency that Cafcass get in to speak to us, and they can be focused on specific things about practice, maybe domestic abuse, or focused on your own well-being, your own health and well-being. And those are things that you can drop in and out of, which are really helpful. And even today, there's been an online learning conference all day, again, that we can drop in and out of in between our own work if we want to, focused on immigration, asylum seekers and refugees. So there's a real focus on our professional development. In terms of professional progression, I found that Cafcass uses our sort of PLRs, so our practice and learning reviews that we have with our managers, and that sort of balance, not just focusing on sort of the families that you're working with or your workload, that I sort of found in the local authority, but that was the main focus. There's also a lot of focus in the PLRs about your own well-being, your own health, and also your own ambitions and your areas of development. And through my PLRs, my manager sort of made me aware of the champion opportunities that are available in Cafcass, which I think are quite unique to Cafcass. So anybody in Cafcass can be a champion, and there's lots of different areas that you can choose to be a champion in. So, for example, I'm a champion for domestic abuse, for Together, and also a child exploitation champion. And that is something that you can be as actively involved in as you want. You meet up with other champions, you can put learning events together, which can be for your area or nationally for Cafcass, being a point of contact for other colleagues. And it gives you freedom to sort of be actively involved in an area of your practice that you might be specifically interested in. So for me, from coming to Cafcass, domestic abuse is one of our priorities, and we have a domestic abuse pathway, and I've really enjoyed as a champion working with my colleagues to sort of make the changes to our practice to improve the experiences of survivors of domestic abuse as they go through the family court process. Also, something that's unique in terms of Cafcass that I accessed was the Emerging Talent Programme, something that I wasn't anything similar in the local authority when I worked there. It's something that you can apply for with your manager's approval, and it's really flexible and bespoke to you. So it can last around 12 months. You have sessions with a strengths coach who looks at areas of strength, not only just in terms of your personal strengths, your professional strengths, and also specific areas that you may want to develop. And from that, being on the Emerging Talent Programme then gives you opportunities to access opportunities within Cafcass that you might link to areas of interest for you. For example, if you were interested in child exploitation and a colleague in another area was doing a piece of work about that, that might enable you to link up with them and be involved in that as well. Recently, there has been the consultant family court advisor role created by Cafcass, so that's the role that I'm in now. And I think Cafcass really listened to us from Cafcass in terms of a lot of people wanted to progress in terms of their role, but they didn't maybe want to go into a managerial role. So the CFCA role was created, which I suppose a similar thing in the local authority would be sort of an advanced practitioner. So I'm currently doing that role, which has been really good. It's sort of a balance of doing collaborative audits, practice observations, and running group supervisions, for example. The sort of things that we do. So in terms of Pathfinder, our team, we're in the very early stages of Pathfinder coming to our area. We're in our first week. But I think in terms of the benefits, we all as an area and as a team could see the benefits of how we work with families that are going through the family courts. So the aim of it is to be more trauma informed. For example, survivors of domestic abuse not having to repeat their experiences to someone like me from Cafcass when they may already have a local authority social worker, for example. We have access to IDVAs. So in my first week, I've already made a referral for someone to an IDVA. My colleagues have as well. So that's something that we didn't have before. And also having more time and to sort of engage in dispute resolution work with families where there might not be any safeguarding or welfare issues. They just need to do some specific dispute resolution work with that family. Obviously, with any change, there can be anxieties, but as an organisation, Cafcass have been really supportive. So it wasn't something that was just sprung on us. There was lots of consultations with us. We had Cafcass workers from other pilot areas come and speak to us and to answer any questions. We had lots of drop-ins. We continue to have lots of drop-ins. And I think, considering it's our first week, I think we've done pretty well as a team. So yeah, it's gone really well so far. And yeah, I just think that in terms of the transition to Pathfinder, I just think it encompasses really how supportive and collaborative Cafcass are as an organisation, which I found in the last 5 years that I've worked here. Yeah, I think that's everything from me, Sophie. Unless there's anything else, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks so much, Kirsty. Oh my God, you shared some amazing stuff there. I'm loving your energy and passion about Pathfinder, although you're only a sort of a week in, but you really have sort of, as an area, I think, really sort of grasped the model and are really excited about that. And I particularly enjoyed hearing about your sort of journey through Cafcass and the opportunities for sort of growth and progression, such as the champions, the emerging talent. So I think you've given a really lovely flavour to people about what's unique here. So thanks very much, Kirsty.
No problem.
I'm going to invite Natalie to join me next and join you. Now, Natalie's been working in a Pathfinder site for a little bit longer now, so I'm hoping you'll be able to share a little bit about working on some of those, working with some of the children families and the court in Pathfinder and what that's like. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie. I am an assistant service manager in the Birmingham and Solihull team in Cafcass. I sit as part of a wider area, A12, so we work all the way up to Stoke and Stafford, all the way down to Worcester and Herefordshire, but the Pathfinder pilot for us is only in the Birmingham Family Court, which covers essentially Birmingham and Solihull local authorities. I've been at Cafcass for about 3 years, just coming up to 3 years. And I also started in the Work to First Hearing team, doing safeguarding letters. And I found that when I came to Cafcass, I learned how much I didn't know about private law. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about the difference between the child arrangements programme as is in place in most of the country and the Pathfinder approach, which we're now taking. And some of the differences and some of the ways that, from my experience as a practitioner who does have a caseload of Pathfinder families, but also supporting lots of practitioners within Cafcass as well, how that feels different and how we've been able to implement that to improve children and families' experiences. So previously, I did not know before I joined Cafcass. So some people may not know, some people may. A parent will make an application, a safeguarding letter will be ordered. A safeguarding letter would be produced by Cafcass. That would take probably about 6 weeks to get to that stage. Then there'd be a FEDRA, a first hearing dispute resolution appointment, where the court would decide whether or not to direct a Section 7 report based on the advice of the Cafcass screening team. And that Section 7 report would be ordered. It would go to the local authority if there was a social worker, or it would come to us if there wasn't a social worker. And that process could then take 12 weeks to do that report. And so automatically proceedings were lasting quite a long time, because if there were difficulties in the court in listing hearings, if a parent didn't attend and it had to be relisted, if the court schedule was really, really busy, so busy that it was taking a month to get to the first hearing from producing a safeguarding letter, there was automatically a really long time that families had to wait before somebody came out to see them, before somebody went to meet the child. And in Pathfinder, somebody is going to meet the child usually within about 25 days of the court issuing the application. So it comes to Cafcass. The file is created within a couple of days. The information screening team will speak very briefly to both parents, identify a bit more about what the issues are from what you can see in the application, and look at the information from the local authority, look at the information from the police, and decide, actually, this is a situation where the child's voice is really important. This is a situation where there are significant safeguarding risks we need to assess. And I'll send it over to my team, where we will allocate a family court advisor to go and meet that child. And within 15 working days of that, the child has been seen and we've got their voice, which starts the proceedings and starts the first report produced for that child, with that child right at the centre. And I think that's one of the biggest differences for me that makes a huge difference for families, is that children are right at the start instead of parents' voices right at the start. And you see that reflected in lots of different ways. The child impact report starts with a picture of the child, so we're already focused visually on that child. It starts with an analysis of what life is like for that child and what their voice says, what their voice might mean, what their body language might mean, what they're telling us. And so already, again, the court is focused on that child's voice right at the beginning of their report. What you then see, and I see this in my experience of working in work to first hearing, doing Section 7s, and then doing child impact reports, is by the time you are speaking to parents and you are assessing things, because you are in there talking to them, giving them a voice, letting them say what their worries are, and giving them your assessment and your view on that, and supporting them, there's much less entrenched conflict. So we are involved at a much earlier stage, identifying what support is needed, identifying whether they need an IDVA to support them because they've experienced domestic abuse. They've already got an expert on board that's supporting them with that. They've got a referral to early help to help them with the challenges because their daughter's recently been diagnosed with ADHD and they're finding that really difficult to manage. All of those little things that we see every single day, support is on board for families much earlier. And that means that children's experiences in the proceedings are their parents are generally less stressed for less long. So not only are we getting them to getting their voice sooner, we're reducing the length of time where they're living with significant uncertainty, with stress of court proceedings, exacerbating conflict between parents, exacerbating risks, and they're getting a decision much more quickly. We're also seeing more children are being heard directly in their voices in proceedings. I think the idea with Pathfinder is that more children are directly involved. Previously, we tried very hard to sort of protect them from proceedings at all costs, but actually now we're recognising there is harm in excluding them as well. Sometimes they really want their voice to be heard, and sometimes that's the real key to knowing exactly what's right for that child. And the feedback from the courts in Birmingham is that really, really assists them as well. One of the things I found when I came to Cafcass is that there is a much better focus in general around domestic abuse. When I was working in the local authority prior to being at Cafcass, I don't know if I was as confident as I am now in assessing domestic abuse. When you come to Cafcass, you see all of the different ways that evidence are put in place to help you make an assessment of what is happening for a child and what the impact is. And we have on our website, you can see all of these materials and these resources that we use to assess domestic abuse, and our domestic abuse practice pathway, which really guides you through understanding and gathering information about what is happening. What's the frequency? What's the duration? What's the risk for that child? What's the impact for that child? What's the impact for the parent that's experiencing abuse? How is that going to impact them in the future? How is that going to impact them now? It really helps you outline your thinking and make that really clear to the court. And it also helps you focus on what's happening for the children and what the risk is now in this current situation with their parents separated. Where do they sit in the middle of all of that? And I feel much more confident assessing domestic abuse now with all of that support and all of that evidence base and different practice aids that help you consider that information properly, to be able to make recommendations to the court. And the Pathfinder process is only built on that. We are now referring people at the information screening stage to an IDVA for a chance to really express everything they've been through with somebody who is an expert in domestic abuse, who is day in, day out, listening to people who have experienced domestic abuse. And that is for people who've experienced domestic abuse of all genders. And then we are finding that we have much more detail about what they've experienced to be able to then make an analysis of the impact for the child, because we're getting an expert report about what's happened for them. So that is strengthening things as well, and supporting parents to really feel heard and understood, and leading to some of that feedback that was on the screen right at the start. For me, one of the biggest things, I'm coming back to something I've already said, is the faster process of getting an outcome for children. Previously, we have had proceedings going on for well over 6 months just to get to a hearing whether Section 7 is being considered. I have had multiple experiences of proceedings concluding under 26 weeks, including a final hearing that's had to be scheduled after a decisions hearing. I had one child where there were significant concerns around honour-based abuse, lots and lots of evidence to support that, and I was able to do a really robust assessment of that using that child's voice, and that had a decisions hearing, there was a final hearing, and that concluded at only 19 weeks. And that child, who was visibly scared of the idea of having to spend time with his dad based on what he'd experienced, had an order that said that he lived with his mum, an order that said that his dad couldn't take him from his mum, which was his biggest concern, and an order that prevented future proceedings coming, so he could really relax. And when I shared the outcome with him, you could see his shoulders drop. He'd been this tense little thing for nearly 20 weeks, and that would have gone on a lot longer for him under the child arrangements programme. Equally, just touching on what was said before about dispute resolution, I've had another family where things concluded within 17 weeks by agreement by parents. Initially, they weren't in agreement with my recommendations, but when I shared them, when I really went through them and explained to them exactly what happened, when I took them through the layout of the report and my analysis and why I was coming to the conclusion that I did, actually the court order reflects that they came to the decisions hearing and they reached an agreement, and that child's proceedings ended at 17 weeks, which is much faster than it would have as well. So we're achieving more sustainable outcomes, more agreements between parents than we ever have, and it's having a really, really big impact in Birmingham for children and families in that sense. The last thing I just wanted to touch on, and I will come back to you in a minute, Sophie, is it's improving our relationship with the courts. There is much more dialogue between the designated family judges and the team at Cafcass about what's manageable, what the expectations are, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what assists them, what isn't assisting them, what a good example of a report looks like, where we haven't quite got it right. And that is really helping us to improve every day, and improving kind of trust in them, for us to trust them to make the right decisions based on our reports, but also them trusting us to give them robust assessments. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say, Sophie, so back to you.
Oh, Natalie, thank you so much. You covered such great content. I really enjoyed hearing about what it's like working in Pathfinder, and you beautifully described the sort of differences between Pathfinder and the Child Arrangements Programme. And you really showed how the child is so central now to proceedings. You really brought that sort of work to life. And it was lovely to hear about the stories of how you actually have made such a difference to some children's lives, which is just really fantastic to hear. So thank you again, really great. And I'm going to invite Imogen to join us now.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Imogen. So I'm going to just hand over to you for your insights into working at Cafcass and just starting out in Pathfinder again.
Thanks, Sophie. Hi, everyone. I'm Imogen Nicholson. I'm a senior service manager in Cafcass in West Yorkshire. I currently manage the team that Kirsty's in, who spoke earlier, and it's the information and screening team. And that's the team within Pathfinder who reviews the immediate safety of children in private law proceedings. And we offer advice and guidance and signposting to families. And as Kirsty mentioned earlier, Pathfinder has just launched in West Yorkshire this month. So it's really new, really exciting for us. And I know Sophie and Kirsty and Natalie have already talked about how Pathfinder completely reshapes private law for children and families in so many positive ways. And so I won't talk too much about that, but those benefits for children, it does range from reduced length of proceedings to early engagement with children and improved domestic abuse practices, as we've touched on. And so it's a really exciting time to join us at Cafcass. And the team that I manage is private law only, as Kirsty touched on, but the majority of family court advisors in West Yorkshire complete private and public law work. So that means that anyone coming to join us in West Yorkshire would be part of the exciting improvements that we're making to private law with Pathfinder, but would also be children's guardians for the children we serve in public law proceedings. And that's just a little bit about the role, but I wanted to spend a bit of time talking about what life is like working for Cafcass. And I've worked for Cafcass since 2013, and I started as family court advisor. And throughout those years, I've just found it the most supportive and nurturing environment to work in. And before I came to Cafcass, I worked in a local authority, and I had really great experiences in local authority. But since coming to Cafcass, I've been too happy to think of leaving and going anywhere else, because it's such a wonderful place to be, a really supportive environment. And there are differences here in Cafcass compared to working in other organisations and in local authorities. And we do work more independently, but there's so much support available to us as social workers. There's daily situational supervision whenever you need that. We have group supervisions, both within individual teams, but also across wider areas. You'd have regular feedback around your work so that you can develop your practice for children. And there's a significant amount of training in Cafcass that's available to all of us. And there's a really thorough induction for everyone who joins us, and that includes induction training. There's also lots of training and events running throughout the year, which we can all access. And as Kirsty talked about earlier, each year we have a full week, which is dedicated to our learning and development. And there's lots of different events taking place across the country all week to support our ambitions for children. And this training really supports our learning and development. And I feel really lucky to work for an organisation that has such a relentless focus on improving children's outcomes. And you can see the difference that we make for children and the impact that learning and development has for children. But within Cafcass, there's also a really relentless focus on colleagues' wellbeing and safety. For example, we've got 24/7 access to counselling support if that's needed by anyone. We have a healthcare package that includes financial contributions towards dental and optical care and things like reflexology. We have dedicated focus on health and wellbeing at every team meeting across the country each month, so that we're thinking about how we all are, how we can build on our resilience. And there's a real investment from Cafcass to our health and wellbeing. And there's also an investment in terms of developing staff. And I know Kirsty spoke about this earlier in terms of her progression within Cafcass. And Kirsty talked about performance learning reviews, where we talk not only about how she's doing and about practice, but also about our own development and thinking about your aspirations. And that could be aspirations to progress in your career, but it may be that your aspirations are around developing more experience in a particular area or learning more about a certain part of our role. So whatever your aspirations are, as managers, we provide opportunities to help to stretch you and develop everyone, so that each member of staff can reach their potential and be the best that they can be for children and families, and so that you can be energized by your role. And I think these are just a few things that are special about working here at Cafcass. But I think for me, they're things that really make Cafcass a unique place to work, because they aren't things that I've experienced in any other organisation. And it's a really safe and supportive environment. We have a real culture of learning, development, and a culture of supporting one another. So if you were interested in joining us at Cafcass, these are the experiences you'd have, and we'd be really excited for you to join us. And I'm happy to answer any questions in the chat if there's anything specifically about West Yorkshire. But thank you for joining us here today, and I'm going to pass you back to Sophie.
Thanks again, Imogen. Again, it was really lovely to hear about a bit more about what life is like at Cafcass, and good to see how happy you are. Actually, it was really lovely, and how supported you felt. I think it really comes across how we're sort of ambitious for our staff as well as for the children that we're working with. So we're just going to pause for a moment. I know there's been lots of chat and questions going on in the chat, and I know that my colleague Danielle's been, and Ian have been trying to sort of answer those as we go along. So I don't know, Danielle, if you want to sort of join me here just to see if there are any other questions that we wanted to try and answer before we come back, before I sort of sum up, or whether we think that most of them have been addressed.
There is one that's come up around support that's provided for families within proceedings. So we do have, it's called our ICFA service, which provides some supervised contact and some feedback to support family court advisors with their reports, and that is available within Pathfinder as well as within Section 7 work. But really it is about signposting people to voluntary organisations. There's been some discussion in the chat around the new role, the family liaison worker, to help to support and signpost and gather all the local information within each area. So what we're trying to do is for children not to be subject to proceedings for significant lengths of time. And what we've seen previously within CAP, and that people have talked about today, is that sometimes proceedings can be very, very lengthy, particularly 16.4 guardians, for example, where everything is tested and tried within the proceedings. And what we're trying to achieve in this Pathfinder, is a test and learn. So we are testing things and evaluating them as we go. Does signposting earlier in the process prevent long duration and prevent families returning back to court? So there is much more of a focus on that early work. Thanks, Sophie.
Great. Ian, I'm just gonna shall I just sum up and then pass back to you?
Yeah,
and we'll
please,
try and answer the rest of the questions in the Q&A and the chat function. I'm conscious of time. So we've been so much great information shared by my colleagues. So I really want to say again, a really big thank you to them for taking the time to share their information. I hope you've been able to see the sort of the journey of our practitioners and that sort of move into the Pathfinder, and how we've really got some opportunities here to make a real difference for children. We know there are opportunities coming up across the country, potentially to be part of Pathfinder. So if you're excited about what you hear today, keep an eye on things. And I know Ian's going to say a little bit more about that. So yes, hopefully you've seen how passionate we are about this Pathfinder work, and how unique Cafcass is as an employer. So again, huge thanks to everyone for coming, and I'm going to pass over to Ian, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Kirsty. Oh, Kirsty, sorry, Sophie. Kirsty. I've got Kirsty on the mind, who did absolutely brilliantly when she was speaking a little bit earlier. So just say thank you all very much to my colleagues taking time out to come and talk to. We had for most of the sessions today, we had over 100 people join, which is impressive, and you've obviously managed to sustain their interest in what you had to say. I think just a few final words for me is just to kind of reiterate really that whatever you are in your career, taking into social work professionals, notwithstanding we obviously do have opportunities for non-social work professionals, as we've touched upon today, and also in our corporate business services teams as well. But as social work professionals, there's a range of opportunities wherever you are, whether you're in the early stage of your career or maybe new to the profession altogether, perhaps as a student. We've obviously got our social work academy, and I know at the moment we're just completing our recruitment for our next cohort of newly qualified social workers who will join us from September. If you're a little bit further into your career, obviously we've got family court advisor, consultant family court advisor position, and then all the way up to kind of the head of practice. So as I say, wherever you might be in your career, whether you're interested in working us within Pathfinder or you're perhaps working for us, but we're not yet in a Pathfinder area, maybe we hope, of course, that perhaps that will be pilots that are expanded into other parts of the country in due course. But I say, whether you're not working in a Pathfinder area or just generally for Cafcass, there's potentially a range of opportunities that you could join us in. Just to reiterate some of the ways in which you can kind of stay in touch with us, we've obviously got our website, and then if it's social media is your thing, then obviously to LinkedIn. Got some range of great video content on YouTube as well. You'll get to hear from watch back some previous live events, as well as get to hear some great content from many of our colleagues who support us with some video recording in the last few months. And all that remains just a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, so it's like we planned it, is to say thank you very much for everybody for taking the time to join us. You will get a copy of this sent to you automatically, and we will be sharing a copy via a newsletter, which many of you, I think, are signing up for this event will hopefully have given your consent for us to add you to our newsletter list, where we'll stay in regular touch with you around things like Pathfinder, but all things Cafcass, generally speaking. So thank you all once again. Thank you for saying, and go and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Have a good evening. Bye bye.